Hi, and welcome to Evolve Church Online. On behalf of Pastors Jono and Nicole, we just want to say welcome and thank you for joining us today. If you're new to Evolve or you've been around for a while, we would love you to fill out a Connect card. So if you could take a few seconds to scan the QR code below or text guest to the number below, and as a quick thank you, we'll send you a bag of coffee, which is fantastic.
That's so good.
Community here at Evolve is super important. We love getting together as a community, hanging out, and just being together. So tonight is young adults at Evolve Church. We're gonna have kind ice cream and yard games. It's always a blast playing yard games with everybody else and just laughing and enjoying. I'm sure there'll be a fire pit as well because the fire pits always come out.
Oh, for sure. It makes for such a good time. Lots of good conversation.
Yeah.
So next week we have our kids back to school party on Sunday. So make sure families, you come out, bring your kids, get them pumped up for next Sunday. We're gonna have so much fun. We're gonna be playing some games, have some special treats, and just really just celebrate school starting again.
We know the kids are super excited for school.
Yeah, so excited. We homeschool, so it's not as exciting for us, but it's, it's gonna be a good time. So make sure you come out.
We also have baptism, September 12th. The last baptism here at Evolve was fantastic. It was when there was only 15 people coming to church, and now we can have a few more people. So we're super excited to be in the room with people wanting to get baptized and just make that commitment. So if you want more information, text info@evolvechurch.com. There's no crazy commitment. Just get a hold with Jono and Nicole, and they'll go through the whole process with you.
Yeah. And just something to keep an eye out for, September 20th, we're going to be launching our Evolve group. So make sure you keep an eye out for that and get involved in community. It's just such a perfect way to, connect with people, get to know people on a deeper level. So definitely just watch out for that on September 20th. Today we're going to hear from the one and only Becca. I'm so excited. So before we do that, let's just worship together.
I've been held in your hands from the moment that I wake up until I lay my head. I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire. Darkest nights, you are close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so
Jesus. God, we thank you that you are good and that you are so faithful. We come to worship you today and just spend time in your presence, God. We love you.
The weapon may be formed, but it won't prosper. When the darkness falls, it won't prevail. 'Cause the God I serve knows only how to triumph. My
pretty amazing that we get to worship together, no matter where you are right now. Maybe you're at the lake, maybe you're at home, but we get to just come together and worship and lean in, and we love these moments. I would love to tell you a little bit more about us as a church, about Evolve. Pastors Jono and Nicole planted this beautiful church 3 years ago, and ever since we have been gathering and meeting, sometimes creatively over the last year, but coming together to worship and grow together in community. And some of the things that we really believe in are doing life in community. We believe that you are not made to do it alone, that you're made to be in family, connected, and so we have so many beautiful ways to step into that. But we believe that there is a seat at the table for you, and we would love to have you come and be a part. We also believe that there is so much room for us to grow together and thrive together and to step into who God has made you to be and what He's put inside of you, and we want to see you step into that. And so many of our amazing teams, we see people stepping into their giftings and into leadership, and it is beautiful. And so if that's something that's in your heart, I would encourage you, lean in. But there is room to grow in this house, to continue forward as a family and as you step into family. And we believe that there is hope for every story that is found in Jesus. And that's my story, that's our pastor's story, that is so many of the people that you'll meet when you walk into Evolve, that we have found this hope and it's changed us. And so we want to invite you into doing life with us and journeying with us wherever you may be on that journey, and to just step into family. So that's a little bit about us. And I just want to say, Evolve family, right now, I want to take a moment to say thank you for your generosity, especially in this wild season. We have seen so many amazing things happen over the last year and a bit. This building being one of those things, pouring into beautiful causes in Edmonton that are reaching people in the margins and pouring into what God is doing in Edmonton. It is beautiful. So much is happening. God continues to work. We're hearing so many beautiful stories, and your generosity actually has made that possible. So we love you. We want to say a huge, huge thank you. If it is on your heart to give today, there's a few ways that you can do that. You can text give to 84321, or you can e-transfer us at info@evolvechurch.com, or you can head to the website. Lots of options, but we just want to let you know that if that is on your heart, we try to make that kind of easy for you. But again, first and foremost, we want to say thank you. We're so excited for what God has ahead, even in this next year as we go into the fall. So keep tracking with us. We're grateful for you and all that you give. So we've got another beautiful Sunday here, and we're about to dive in. So we'll see you in a moment. Well, I just want to start by saying how grateful I am to be standing here today. I am so grateful that I get to share with you today. What an honor. And I am so grateful that I get to just be in the middle of what God is doing at Evolve. And I just want to say a huge thank you and show just gratitude to Pastors Jono and Nicole. And I get to do life day in and day out with them. And I feel so grateful for this opportunity today and for everything that they pour into us as a church. And so thank you, love you, and I'm sharing with you today. So get ready. Now, before I actually dive in, I have a text that I want to dig into, but I wanted to share a little bit about my own journey. So I found Jesus when I was 16, changed my life, and around the same time, I heard about human trafficking, and it broke my heart. And in that moment, I knew that I needed to be a part of making change in this area. And you know, as a new Christian, I kind of had this prayer in my heart, like, God, I will go anywhere, I will do anything. And maybe you've heard people pray that prayer, maybe you've prayed that prayer, and I think it's so beautiful. And I did. I went to Cambodia, I went to Thailand, I wound up working at the Dream Center, which is now Adira, and with Youth at Risk. So many beautiful things and doors that opened that I could begin to see what God was doing and partner with that when it came to justice. So I always love reflecting on the fact that right in the middle of getting to know Jesus and starting to walk with him, I started to have this heart for justice. But again, this prayer in my heart, there was this like pull towards something big and what it would look like to be a part of it. But every step of this journey, God has been teaching me the value of the little, of the everyday, and of the in-between moments. You know, the people that you bump into, your family, your friends, the ways that we start and end our days. It's the little things that can become such a big part of what we carry into the world. And 2 years ago, I left my marketing job and I was pretty burnt out. I was feeling pretty empty. And so I started to kind of dig back into the things that God had put into my heart. In Bible college, I went because my heart was for social justice, and through that time, God started to just grow my heart for the church and through what he was doing in the church. And during this time, I started to dig back and say, like, God, what have you really made me to do? And how did I kind of end up here? And so, again, so grateful for every step of this journey. But in this moment, I kind of pulled things back, and I found myself actually in kind of this like rest season. But I started applying to churches because that was what was in my heart, and I wanted to do everything in my power to just like step into that and actually take some action. So I did that, and things started to unfold. I had an offer come up actually at a church in Edmonton. There was an opportunity to move to Vancouver. Doors started to open, but as I began to pray and even seek some wisdom of some people around me, I really felt that God was saying no. And actually at that same time, I was leading worship at Evolve. And I remember standing on the stage one week and looking out as I was leading worship and just having this realization in my heart of the ways that I had grown being planted in this house and the ways that I'd seen the people in front of me grow. And I couldn't help but think, like, what more could God have if I just stayed? And not wanting to even miss out on that. And so there was this shift that happened in my heart. And during that season, I started pouring into our youth girls who I love. And in those moments, there was kind of this light bulb that went off when I was going after some big opportunities and big things, big changes, and sitting in a room with our youth girls, laughing and talking about Jesus. It just hit me that, like, this is what really matters. And so I listened to that pull in my heart. I listened to what I felt that God was leading me in, and I said no to some of these opportunities that were coming up. And I actually took a pretty chill job just so that I could keep serving in the church, keep doing the things that were in my heart, keep resting. I was working at a boutique, and I was living off of the River Valley, and it became this beautiful season of rest. And during that time, God began to speak to my heart, teaching me what rest really looks like, teaching me about what he's put inside of me, and just bringing healing to things that I didn't even know he wanted to heal. And during this time, I kept pouring into our Evolve family, our beautiful Evolve family, and something profound happened during that time. I kind of peeled back all of the external, all of the big things that we can sometimes see as important, the big opportunities, the big moments. And I got to see a glimpse of how God sees, a glimpse of what I would say in God's eyes really matters. The small moments, the day-to-day, the hours of prayer and sitting with people and being with my youth girls, the moments that really change us on a heart level and overflow into our life. And so, you know, I've been reflecting on a passage here that I'm about to read and thinking, you know, what really matters to God? Perhaps we don't have to move to Africa and sell everything we own, although that's beautiful if you're called to do it. Perhaps it's actually more about being rooted and grounded in love, in mercy, and about seeing the person who is right in front of us. So today, I want to talk about Micah 6:8. And you might be very familiar with this verse. If you're not, that's beautiful, because we're going to just dive into it a little bit. But this verse, if you're familiar, it says, "He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." And I'm just going to jump back a couple verses in verses 6 and 7. it kind of leads into this passage, and it says, "With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God? Shall I come to him with burnt offerings? Will the Lord be pleased with 10,000s of rams, with thousands of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn?" And on and on and on. And there's kind of this picture of like continuing, like what more sacrifices could be made? And it leads into verse 8 that kind of interrupts this narrative. "He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." And I spent some time in commentaries and in sermons as I sat with this passage. And the theme that came up is actually just this emphasis that the people of God were focusing on what external offerings they could give. If we could just offer all of these thousands of rams and rivers of oil, all of the external offerings. But God wasn't so concerned with that. He was actually concerned with the heart and where those things were coming from. The way, the everyday, the little details, the heart-to-heart moments. So in this moment, it's like the narrative actually flips, and we see what really matters to God. It's changed hearts who, through those changed hearts, begin to bring change into the spaces they walk into. So let's just dig into this passage a little bit. First of all, I just want to point out that it says, "What does the Lord require of you?" And that is a strong word, require. But the word require actually comes from the Hebrew language, where this would have been originally written. And the original meaning actually points back to words like seeking, caring, and searching. So it could be said that more than sacrifice, more than external offerings, God is looking for people who will walk humbly, act justly, and love mercy, even searching for that. This is the thing that God cares about. With that said, I kind of want to just settle into these three things: justice, mercy, and to walk humbly, that come up in this verse. To act justly. I think that we have heard a lot over the last year when it comes to justice. And if you care for justice as I do, I want to assure you that God does too. I'm going to read a couple of passages. In Isaiah 1 verse 17, it says, "Learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause." Psalm 89 verse 14 says, "Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne, O God. Steadfast love and faithfulness go before you." In Psalm 82 verse 3, it says, "Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute." And we know that God's truest religion is to care for the widow and the orphan. I could list off so many passages that point back to justice. If we dig into the Word of God, it is so clear that He cares about justice. And God's justice is restorative in nature. He is always restoring. He sat with the leper. He saw the widow. He sought out the people who were being taken advantage of, and He gave them a voice. God noticed the people who were in the margins, and we are called to do the same. As people who love Jesus, as people who follow in His footsteps, we are called to see the people on the margins, to give voice to them, and to even speak up on their behalf in some cases. And maybe even some of you who are watching today, God's put something in your heart, like a not-for-profit or a dream, where you want to actually come alongside people who do not have a voice, who are in the margins. And I just think that's beautiful, and like say yes to that and walk into that and take those steps. God's heart is for justice. My heart broke over this last year, seeing everything that took place. I prayed, I cried, I started conversations with people in my world. Racism, violence, genocide, heartbreaking. And I let it be heartbreaking. I let it change how I saw things, and I invited God into that as I walked. And God, what are the things that I can actually do in that? We need to ask those questions. But what was heartbreaking in the middle of that too was that people who were standing there saying like, hey, we need to advocate for these causes, we're then turning around and turning against other people who maybe just didn't share opinions. And so suddenly what could have started as advocating for another human turned into division against another person. Hate, division, and brokenness. But the heart of justice is actually the worth of every human being. So if we say that we stand for justice, but we mistreat the one right in front of us, well, we just might have some hard work to do. God's model of justice says that each and every human being is of great worth. Love your neighbor as yourself. And I just want to read one more passage here. It says in Isaiah 56 verse 1, it says, maintain justice and do what is right. Blessed is the man who does this, the man who holds fast, who keeps the Sabbath and keeps his hand from doing evil. And I can't help but talk about Sabbath when I talk about justice because of this verse. I think that is so profound. And, you know, there's something beautiful that in rest, in Sabbath, in quiet, our hearts are changed and we begin to see things how God sees. And our hearts begin to break for what breaks his heart. And pretty soon it's hard to look at the injustices in the world without it breaking yours. Justice starts in the heart. And Sabbath leads to an overflow of life, which shows forth in good fruit, in true justice. When we come into rest, when we come into Sabbath, when we come into these quiet spaces with God, he speaks into our identity, he shapes us, and we begin to become more and more aware of who we are and whose we are, and that changes how we live. Love mercy. The next thing that he says is to love mercy. And again, our attention is drawn to the heart posture. If we are called to do justice, it must flow from a heart of mercy. Matthew 5 verse 7 says, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. And the gift of mercy is that when we become merciful, our hearts begin to understand how to receive mercy in turn. As we continue to receive that mercy, as we come to God, we become better able to extend that gift now to others. And, you know, even as we begin to learn to show mercy to the parts of ourselves that are still healing or that we're still growing in, it actually helps us to step back and offer that same mercy to those around us who maybe we don't understand where they're coming from or the context, but there's mercy there that we can understand. And mercy goes hand in hand with justice. Justice is seen in the causes we rally behind, and yet mercy is seen in our day-to-day dealing, how we see, care for, and walk with those around us. It looks something like this. My dear friends, don't let public opinion influence how you live out our glorious Christ-originated faith. If a man enters your church wearing an expensive suit and a street person wearing rags comes in right after him, and you say to the man in the suit, sit here, sir, this is the best seat in the house, and either ignore the street person or say, better sit here in the back row, haven't you segregated God's children and proved that you are judges who can't be trusted? Listen, dear friends, isn't it clear by now that God operates quite differently? He chose the world's down and out as the kingdom's first citizens with full rights and privileges. This kingdom is promised to anyone who loves God. That's James chapter 2, verse 1-6 in the Message. And in verse 8, it says, you do well when you complete the royal rule of the scriptures. Love others as you love yourself. Walk humbly. So we are called to do justice, motivated by a heart that is rooted in love and mercy. But what of the ways that we spend our days, that we start and end and see the people that we encounter in between? We are called to walk humbly. Jesus walked in the greatest humility, and that's because he knew his identity. And even as we talk about, again, rest and Sabbath, and as we abide in God, this revelation of our own identity, Jesus walked in full confidence. He knew exactly who he was, And actually in his commissioning moment, or kind of this like graduation into starting to do what he was called to do and made to do, it was marked by words from his Father, words from God. Behold, this is my Son whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Matthew 3, verse 17. Jesus began his work. He began his doing of justice, walking it out with this commissioning from his Father. He knew who he was. And yet Jesus humbled himself in humanness. He humbled himself, and in his day-to-day, we see that he chose humility. Instead of power, he chose to wash his disciples' feet. He chose to ride in on a donkey. He chose to come humbly. Jesus sat with the outcasts. He touched the leper. He was not afraid of being in the middle of it with people. He walked in humility. He knew who he was, and he knew whose he was. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3-8 says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, born in likeness of men, found in human form, he humbled himself." I just want to read that last part again. Who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God. He emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, found in human form, he humbled himself. If anyone could have demanded power or accolade or a horse, it was Jesus. But he rode in on a donkey. He came humbly. He continually chose the most humble posture that he could in every room that he walked into. Even as he was seized to be taken to the cross, he approached that moment in humility. Earlier this year, I attended a memorial of a beautiful woman, and my brother-in-law is one of the kindest, most amazing people that I know, and his mom passed away, and I had the honor of sitting in a room full of people who sat and told stories and shared about this woman's life. Now, this woman, her name is Carmen Jans, and I sat in that moment hearing these stories of someone who most likely was not on any headlines, most likely didn't take the stage. You probably haven't heard of her name before today. And it changed me. It changed the way that I wanted to live my life and the trajectory that I wanted to walk on. Because story after story after story told of a woman who gave everything she had, everything of herself, to see the person in front of her every single time, to make sure no one was left out, to make sure someone always had a home to come into, to make sure that if someone needed prayer, she was available, even if she didn't know what to say. And I was moved to tears by these stories. There's this impact of her life that I believe actually would change the course of history. How? Because I saw people filling this room one by one who she invited into her home, who she sat and prayed with, who she embraced, and each one now praying with others, inviting them into their homes, encouraging and giving what they received from this beautiful woman. There is a ripple effect from our humble service. And, I am so honored to be standing here today, just amazing. What a beautiful honor and privilege to be a part of what God is doing here. But this, the stage, the mic, the camera, all the things, this isn't it. This isn't the thing. It's living rooms and it's dining room tables. It's tear-filled phone calls and prayers when you don't know what else to say for that person sitting in front of you. It's counting others more significant than yourself. It's our humble acts of love, of serving the one in front of us that are bit by bit changing the world around us. And this is what really matters to God. Carmen Jan's impacted hundreds in her lifetime, thousands by the ripple effect, maybe more, of living a quiet life with God, spent completely on others. And that's a legacy that I want to leave, That is what we are here to do, is to spend our life on behalf of others, to walk in humility. This is what matters to God. And now you may be hearing all of this today and thinking, okay, that's beautiful, but not me. That's a little bit unattainable. I want to share just one more thing from this passage, because the language of justice, mercy, and humility is tied together beautifully in 3 sweet words: with your God. And these may be some of the most important words in this passage. The goal of living a life that reflects Jesus is beautiful and it's important, but we actually can't do it without him. To live humbly in justice and mercy is a noble effort, but what does it look like to actually walk with our God each day? To let his mercy shape us, to let his love shape how we love those around us. 1 John says that whoever keeps God's word, in him truly the love of God is perfected. By this we know that we are in him. Whoever says he abides in him ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. In this beautiful example that we have in the man named Jesus. So we have this perfect example. But how many of you know that if you want to become like someone, the best way to do that is actually just to spend a little more time with them? If we want to walk like Jesus, then we need to walk with him. God freely gives his Spirit to empower us, his hand to guide us, his word to renew us. And as we walk with him, we abide in him, and it changes us. These are Jesus' own words. He says, "Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me." John 15, verse 4. We were made for closeness with God. We were made to walk with him every day, to wake up before we go to bed, to connect. And as we connect to this true vine, as we abide, this is where we flourish and thrive. So how do we walk with God? As I kind of wrap up here, I want to just talk about a couple of things. What does it look like to abide? We say that Sabbath and rest and abiding in him, but let's just dig into that. So the first thing is rest and Sabbath. When we come into rest, this is actually where God begins to minister to our hearts and show us who we are, and our identity comes out. Is there a day in your week that you set aside to come back to center with the one who made you? Sabbath is meant to be in a moment in the week where you get to recalibrate, bring everything back in. As things get loud and the noise of the world ramps up, especially now, you go on social media for 5 minutes, it gets loud. If you turn on the news for 5 minutes, it gets loud. But Sabbath is meant to be this moment where we reconnect with heaven, we reconnect with God's perspective, and we find refreshing. We were not meant to live tired, burnt out, and weary. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary." And so he's asked us to set aside a day in the week. This is a beautiful gift where we come back to that refreshing. And my Sabbaths are sometimes filled with, quiet time, with prayer, with reading books and digging into my Bible. But sometimes they're filled with brunch with my closest friends, running in the river valley, and, usually a combination of all of those things. But the goal is to slow down, to find rest, and to be reacquainted with the joy and goodness that we are meant to live in as we come into closeness with God, to taste and see that he is good. So how is your Sabbath? Now, maybe you're hearing this and you're like, I've never even heard that word before today. Again, Sabbath is just meant to be a day of rest, one day in your week where you take some time to just pull everything back. So I want to just give us some homework today, actually. I want us to find one person this week and ask, how is your Sabbath? And together, why don't we just challenge each other to find one way to just take your Sabbath actually up a little bit more. Maybe that means setting aside a little bit more time. Maybe that means quieting out the noise just a little bit more, turning your phone off a little bit earlier, prioritizing that family dinner a little bit more. What is one thing? So again, this week, find one person and just ask them that question. How was your Sabbath? Do you have a Sabbath? And what's one way that you can step towards that? John Mark Comer would describe Sabbath as a day set aside for rest and worship. What are the things that bring you back to rest, that cause worship to bubble up in your heart? We're also meant to live in what I love to call the rhythms of grace. Matthew 11 in the Message translation phrases it that way, and I think it's so beautiful. In the unforced rhythms of grace. Even those words are like a breath of fresh air. The unforced rhythms of grace. And that doesn't just mean once a week. That actually means how you start your day, how you end it. Do you have a morning routine? Do you have an evening routine? Is being in the Word and being in prayer a part of it? I think that, the goal, again, in all of this is to keep our hearts in a space where we're able to actually hear God's voice and walk with Him closely. And a part of that comes when we lean into rest, when we lean into the quiet. Practical thing, John Mark Comer advocates for giving your phone a bedtime and then not taking it out until you started your day. There are so many things that I could say. And, if Sabbath and this kind of rhythm of rest is something that is resonating with you, I would encourage you, you've heard us talk about it before, but read this book by John Mark Comer. It is called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Again, that's by John Mark Comer. I read this book last year, and it just changed the way that I look at rest and slowing down and the priority that is. So again, we could talk about this forever, but I would encourage you, pick up that book if you haven't already and give it a read. Another thing that we need to lean into as we seek to walk in justice, in mercy, in humility, and with our God, is the identity that He's given us actually as sons and daughters. As we know our identity in Him, as we know who God has called us to be, and we know whose we are, we know that we belong to Him, we can live in the freedom that comes with that. Orphans work hard to build a life, to protect it, to keep and hold tightly. But sons and daughters know how to rest, how to trust, how to hold lightly and live freely. When we know who we are and whose we are, when we know our seat at the table, our natural life flow is humble, it's merciful, it's kind, and it's just. Humility comes much more easily from a heart who knows its worth. Do we know who we are, and do we know whose we are? And, I think that it's important to just say, right now in this moment, that wherever you're at, whatever you are walking through, God sees you and He has chosen you and He's for you. Even if the pieces don't seem to line up in this moment, even if you feel like you've got a ways to go, He's for you. And He has a purpose for your life. He has a calling for you to walk in justice and to bring people out of the margins. But even right here, right where you are, He sees you and He's after your heart. And so I would just encourage you to just invite Him into that. God desires justice. He desires us to do good. But what pleases Him, what really matters to God, it's not so much the offering as it is the heart behind the offering. God desires changed hearts. Hearts that walk in humility, overflowing into justice and mercy. Our grand gestures are not so grand if they keep us from seeing the person right in front of us. I love how in Micah 6:8, God just interrupts this idea that this huge, valiant external offering is needed. And it's almost to say in response, walk with me, become like me, learn to see the value in the person right in front of you, and be changed by what you see. And why rest? Because true justice flows from rest. Because it is in rest that we are changed and transformed. And that is exactly the type of people that God is looking to partner with to bring justice into all the earth. Luke chapter 10 verse 7 says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." This is what matters to God.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Becca. That was so, so good. I hope that you got something out of that. I know we did. Becca is so amazing. If you need prayer this week, make sure you just text prayer to the number below and someone will connect with you and pray with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important to connect even in prayer online with somebody, or just in person or texting. We can make it work and make it work for you. Don't forget to follow us on social media so you know everything that we got going on during the week. We look forward to seeing you next week. Bye for now.